understand investors are disappointed because they were trying to get in on a hot IPO. And I guess it was the speech in Shanghai that really, I think, is going to prove to be a very costly mistake. It's pretty clear here that the business model is going to have to change, and I think it's appropriate that regulators step in. There was concern even here in the States when this was first announced that the way this was being sold to relatively unsophisticated investors, and I think regulators took issue with that, not to mention some of the concerns they had around the banking sector.
So then how has the suspension impacted Ant Group's business as well as Alibaba's overall structure?
Well, for clear, the business model will have to change, and I think also when they look at the banking sector, they're going to want to know why are you outsourcing your underwriting? Because the way it's set up is the bank actually takes the capital risk, Ant Group just collects the fees. So it begs the question, who's actually doing the underwriting and doing the credit research on whether or not the loans could even be paid back? And it's an appropriate role for regulators to step in here.
So then, given some of the issues at play, what do we know about the likelihood of this suspension being temporary and the Ant Group eventually meeting the requirements sometime in the future?
Yeah, I think they got the message, and I think the message was the regulators wanted to get out there that we're in charge here, and I think now the company understands that there could be a delay here. It's likely to be something like 6 months, but ultimately it's an important company and it'll be back in the marketplace.
Now, China's financial regulators did say that the move is to better protect the market and investors. What are your thoughts not just on Ant Group, but how that might affect other companies who also plan on listing?
Ultimately, they'll be more careful. They'll make sure that they're crossing the T's and dotting the I's. And this is part of what an underwriting is about. It's why regulators have to step in, because not every investor is an institution like myself. A lot of investors are relatively unsophisticated, and this is their life savings, and they want to protect these people. And they also want to protect the banking system. Some of this has parallels to our own financial crisis back here in the United States, and I don't think they want to make some of the same mistakes.
So then what can we expect in terms of regulations and risk control when it comes to a small amount of online lending?
I think for starters, what they'll do is make sure that there's a capital buffer. I can't tell you how much that'll be. Will maybe 10, 20, 30 cents on the dollar. Ultimately, they want to do that to make sure they don't see that these asset-backed securities, because remember, they're packaging all these loans. Are all these loans safe, and are they being sold in a proper way? So ultimately, they're going to want a capital buffer to protect against future losses.
Now, I want to talk about the kind of investors who were really clamoring for Ant Group. What sort of demographics were we looking at?
All of the above. Very unsophisticated investors to very large institutions wanted to get a part of this. I think ultimately, now that regulators are stepping in, I think ultimately this is going to end up looking more like a financial IPO and less like a hot tech IPO. And that might disappoint some investors in the future, because the valuations will come in.
So then explain more about the ecosystem of China's online financing and lending platform and how that differs from other major markets.
I'm not an expert on microlending or the microsystem behind it, but I do see that this is a very fast-growing area of the financial community. And microlending is going to be very important, not just for China. It's going to be important for other parts of the world. So it's very important here that we have a structure that's safe and protects all those involved, and that's why I think the role that regulators are playing here is very important.
Now, how do you see the role of Ant Group and some of these other fintech companies when it comes to teaming up with or perhaps competing with China's traditional finance and banking system in the short term and then in the longer term?
I think they're going to have to learn to play by the rules. And banking is a very serious business, and I think fintech is great. We have it here in the United States as well. But they have to live under the same regulatory structure that other banks do as well. I think that's an important part of the game plan here, and I think that's the message the regulators wanted to get out.
And so how do you see this affecting the broader business for Alibaba?
The broader business will be fine. I think it'll remain unaffected. I think the share price went down simply because the IPO is being taken away, and there's a lot of money on the table here, and a pretty big disappointment. This really happened just very shortly before this was going to list.
And obviously, they did take a loss there, but then you also have Singles Day coming up next week, a huge boon usually for this company. What are the expectations there?
Gosh, I haven't looked at my spreadsheets lately, but if it's anything like in the past, it'll probably be very large. Online is an extremely important part of the world economy today, and actually COVID has probably pulled in a lot of business that we would have seen years out. It's a very exciting business.
All right, and just anything that you're excited to watch for this company if the IPO is still going to be on hold for a while?
I think we'd have to watch to see the changes that they make, and I think they've gotten the message, and the company's already made a very important statement. They want to embrace regulation here. I think they're disappointed, but I think they'll learn to play by the rules, and ultimately this is going to come out and probably be a very exciting company.
All right, thank you. Always good to see you.